Hello, and welcome to Let's Talk Transformation. This is Susie Lewis, your host, and today we will be talking about leadership identity and emotional regulation. Every leader I know is currently exhausted. With the onslaught of AI busyness and the evolving and uncertainty of markets and society, they're tired. But something else I'm observing is that they are existentially empty, if you like. So they're making more decisions than ever with less certainty, less time, and less idea of who they actually are as their job changes with AI. And today's guest has spent 15 years inside the machine, I like to say, at Microsoft and Morgan Stanley. She has also competed at Commonwealth Games level and knows exactly what peak performance looks and feels like. And she also knows exactly what it looks and feels like when it collapses. Lena Thompson, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Susie. It took us a few months to get here, but so I'm excited.
Yeah. We've been building our resilience.
Exactly.
Lena, most leadership experts come from academia or consulting or both, and you come from a different place, elite sport, but also the trading floors of global finance. And I think that combination is exactly why your work hits a little bit differently. You know, you competed at the Commonwealth Games in fencing and you ran marathons. So as a marathon runner, hat off to you there. But both are about precision and resilience under extreme pressure. So can we start there? What did elite sport teach you about leadership that 15 years inside Microsoft and Morgan Stanley also confirmed?
Yeah, so for most of my life, I've really been focusing on developing that physical resilience. As a child, I went through multiple immigrations. We moved from Russia when I was 13 to Israel when I walked into a classroom and I couldn't understand a single word. And that was really hard. It really required me just to kind of be okay by myself. And that takes a lot of strength, especially as a 13-year-old, which I didn't realize back then. And then a year later, we moved to South Africa, where it's a new environment, a new language, and I don't speak English again. Well, again, I had to literally rebuild myself from inside out. So I think by the time I really started getting serious about fencing, which was when I was around about 17, 18, I've had that strong foundation about my, I guess, physical and mental resilience. That got me through, some really interesting times at the time, especially when I had a bike crash where I couldn't even walk the night before my major competition. I still I wanted. But what I'm saying with this is even though I had this physical and mental strength, emotionally, I was literally all over the place. I couldn't contain my anger, my frustration, my impatience. I was extremely impatient, and that resulted, in breakdown of some really important relationships in my life. And going through my corporate career for years, where I've consulted to global firms, organizations all over the world, eventually I got to the stage where I started seeing those patterns so clearly. And I mean, that really led me to reevaluate completely how I viewed my entire life.
Wow. Yeah, but before we go into, I want to pick up on the patterns discussion. Before we go there, why fencing? I'm just totally curious. What attracted you to fencing, Lena?
So my entire life, I was told I was rubbish at sports. I couldn't jump, I couldn't run, I couldn't do anything. I could throw pretty far. And coach had been always very competitive. So they always like look for the next big star. And I always felt like left out, like I wasn't enough for any sports. And then when we moved to Israel, my dad, he was always into fencing. He fenced when he was younger. He, I think, met a Israeli fencing coach and who came to, just play one day. And he was like, wow, he saw something in me. I don't know what that was, but he really like took me under his wing. And even when we decided to immigrate, he asked my parents to leave me behind. But at 14, so he could coach me. This didn't happen. That gave me this kind of a bit of confidence because nobody's ever saw that potential in me. So when we then got to South Africa, years later, I picked it up again and it felt like, yeah, that was just the right fit for me, really.
Wow. Well, thank you. Thank you for that. I was just intrigued by fencing. But I think it brings up, two subjects now, Lena. The validation subject of somebody saw you, heard you, believed in you, and also this idea of patterns that we all have in, I like the rucksack analogy, we all have patterns and other stuff in our rucksacks that we carry with us. What's the one thing that really shocked you the most about how senior leaders actually function behind closed doors? What's in their rucksacks and how does it show up?
Well, a lot of time what I see is that denial. where they pretend to be so focused and so strong for everyone else that they completely suppress and they deny the emotions. And obviously, it's not a conscious thing, it's like a self preservation. I've got to be strong for others. But then what happens oftentimes is when they go home, it's like a different persona emerges. They become emotionally shut down or completely regulated. They will like stonewall their partners. And so that plays out very differently. So it's almost like becomes these two identities, one at home and one at work, all because of the complete disconnect from the emotions.
And if I take that, I mean, we've all seen and tried the burnout advice: take more breaks, set better boundaries, sleep more, rest more, etc. And I'm not saying that that's wrong at all, and it could be helpful. But I've watched brilliant leaders, and I have myself done all of it and still felt completely empty. And to come back to what you were saying around suppressed emotions and almost mismanagement of energy, or not conscious management of energy, which for me is a completely different problem and therefore a completely different solution. Can you walk us through what that solution might like? Because if we take that lens, everything we're being advised to do is actually addressing the wrong thing.
Yeah, it's not even like that it's addressing. It's like it gives us like a coping strategy. And, the rest, what you just mentioned, it's great to support us. But the thing is, by the time the burnout shows up physically, it's been building internally for a very long time. And it can come from, a number of things like overextending ourselves, right? Every time we go against ourselves, when we say yes, that feels like no. When we carry extra responsibility that is not even ours, but we feel responsible. We've got this like weight of the world on our shoulders. When we stay in a relationships or in a job that we've outgrown, that is draining us. So every single time, it's that like this internal pressure keeps building. It's just eventually it's got to go somewhere, and it manifests as a burnout, as depression, as even physical illness. And a lot of the times that happens is because we don't have that relationship with our emotions, especially when we're talking about leaders, really achievers. They believe that they're strong enough. They've got to put on this brave face and show up for everyone. They don't realize that they're doing it from the place of lack, from the place of self-abandonment. And eventually, the outcome, as we know, unfortunately leads to burnout.
And it's the myth, isn't it, that that's what strong leaders do, in air quotes, strong leaders. But also, it's uncomfortable. This discussion is not really open in organizations, or it's had sort of in between the lines. And I think part of what makes your work so distinctive and so effective is that you use tools that the corporate world has historically dismissed and are now coming round to stepping into a little bit. And I think dismissal says more about corporate culture's relationship within a work than our relationship within a work. If you like, the result is often the same. So you use human design in your coaching. And for the skeptics, and there will be skeptics, of course, how do you make the case that this is an integral part of leadership and not astrology for executives or woo-woo or all the other labels I've heard around this type of work? And what has it unlocked for the leaders that conventional coaching just simply couldn't?
Yeah. So personally, human design is like gives you permission slip to be fully you.
I love human design, I must admit. I find it very, very, very interesting.
What is your design? Do you know?
6-3. Innovator generator?
Manifesting generator.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. So, I mean, I remember years ago, I had this complete burnout. I opened my laptop and I looked at it and I couldn't remember how to type. That's how severe it was. And I had so many calls booked back to back. I've canceled every single one of them. And then the last one, I was like, no, I'm going to chat to her. No idea why. So I jumped on a call and started talking. And she said to me, have you ever heard of human design? And I'm like, no, what's that? She said, I think it may resonate with you. And something about it, I don't know, maybe the name or something, like was really intriguing. So I went on a website, I went on a YouTube. I was like up all night long, just YouTubing it, listening. I bought a book. I've had a coach, as I always do. I have a coach for everything. And I went fully in. And for years, that's what I spoke a lot about at the events, at the conferences. And it's so interesting that people who are even skeptics, something clicks for them. It's like they have this deeper emotional connection they can't explain. And so when they come up to me, they're like, it makes no logical sense, but I can just feel myself in this, It's language that we don't even have to describe, but it's a deeper resonance. And human design, it really shows you who you are at your core, because there is such a disconnect between who we think we are, who we truly are. And that
Yeah.
helps you not just to come back to yourself, I mean, whatever that means to many people, but to understand how you are wired to optimize your energy and to make your decisions.
Yeah, and I think it's so accurate. I mean, I was blown away by things I was seeing that my friend who's a coach in human design was walking me through it. And I was like, well, how did you know that? How does that work? And I wasn't skeptical. But even if I had have been skeptical, the accuracy is quite impressive.
And it helps you completely transform relationships, your colleagues, with your partner, with your children. Like I know my daughter is a manifester. So she will start many things at once and she'll probably not finish any of them. So I've got to kind of guide her and encourage her like to work with the design. But so many people that don't know way, they'll say, no, you've got to finish what you start. Or you've got to make decisions fast, or you've got to sleep on your decisions. But it's not completely true. We are just different beings that understanding those nuances can completely transform relationships, and our whole lives say about relationships.
What's people's reactions to that? I mean, I suppose on a one-to-one level, it's different than if you're talking about it in groups, or is it?
Well, as I said, when I first started doing speaking, every single presentation I had was about human design, because energy is our highest currency. You already know without energy, there is no life. And if anybody had burnout, they will understand that. So how do we optimize our energy? Because the more energy, and I'm not talking about energy from a Red Bull or from coffee, but the internal energy that moves through us. So whenever we have more energy, we start making better decisions, we make better choices, we take more powerful aligned actions, we see better results. Human design really helps us to optimize our energy. So when you kind of present it from that angle, from decision making, from energy, rather than, going into incarnation cross and talk about what the earth means, what the moon means, which I find absolutely accurate and fascinating, you kind of presented this in terms of energy and decision making. I'll never forget, it was a few years ago at Copenhagen. I was speaking at this big HR event. And afterwards, as I finished, this one woman comes to me and she's like almost crying. She says, "Can I give you a hug?" I said, "Of course you can." She goes, "You have no idea how long I've been waiting for human design to reach corporate world." It was like, wow.
And I mean, it totally has its place there. And I think this discussion around energy management is at the heart of leadership for me, as is consciousness. I mean, you describe consciousness as moving from the first floor to the 10th floor. I love that analogy, like sort of suddenly you can see the whole street as opposed to just the pavement you were stood on, or, going up on the balcony and looking at the dance floor, that type of thing. Can you tell us more about that and what you see from the 10th floor, that you don't see when you're stood there?
Yeah, so that analogy is also, I can't remember where I've heard it from. It's not mine. I'm not going to take credit. I did hear it from somewhere, just can't remember. And I thought, oh, wow, it just makes so much sense. So energy and consciousness are interchangeable. So if you think about it, currently you may be like on the first floor of the house. You walk in there and all you see is like the garden and the swings and the cars and the parking garage. And you see what you see. That's all you're aware about. Start going up and higher, the escalator or whatever stays if you're fit enough. And then now you're like on the eighth floor, and all of a sudden you like see a park and you see a church and you see maybe an airfield, and you start becoming aware of so many more things that you previously weren't aware of. So that's how it works in our typical life. When we start using our energy correctly, when we start generating more of our internal energy, we become aware of the thoughts of ideas like never thought of before. So when people go, how am I going to make it happen? Or how am I going to achieve this? How is not important. Increase your energy and how will be shown to you. It's like all of a sudden you'll get this epiphany, or you will walk past a billboard or wherever you see something on an advert that will give you the answer you were looking, or somebody will phone you. I always say life responds to your energy, not your struggles. And the more energy you start generating, the more aware you become of possibilities, opportunities to which you just currently cannot see. And that's what human design helps you to do, as you know, where there are different energy types, the different, almost like 5 categories of people. And it's not to label them, it's just the way they use their energy. So for some, it's like they've got consistent energy to work, create, to build, but only if they feel that excitement and passion, that energy becomes nonstop for them. While other people, they work more in ebbs and flows. So they'll have energy, like a burst of energy, and then they'll work, but then they'll need to step away and almost go for a walk or rest or do something. and then they will come back and they've got another burst. So whenever that burst comes, that's the right step for them. That's the right time for them to work. Rather than, well, let's all go to the office and work 9 till 5 with 1 hour lunch. Well, for some, it's just going to be an absolute torture.
Which is why that no longer works. And I think we've been forcing people to code switch into something that suits them or it doesn't. And I think all sorts of profiling, whether it's MBTI or DISC or human design, gives us some idea of preferences, but human design, like the leadership circle for me, goes deeper than that. And we understand not only why we have our patterns, but also there are elements of how we can react differently. And I think, bringing together energy management and decision making is really important, because often decision making is just seen as a purely cognitive act. It's like, I'm a senior leader, it's my job to make decisions. I would challenge that. But I think creating the conditions for decisions to be made is also about energy. So how do you see leaders reacting to energy and decision in the same sort of piece of work? And what are the biggest mistakes you see when people refuse to make that connection?
Yeah. So, I mean, you're absolutely right. We're giving so much emphasis to our logical mind, but then let's look at what logic is. Logic doesn't know about the future. That's why we get overthinking. We get this like mental burnouts. It doesn't care about the present moments. All it's based is on a data, facts, and the past experiences. So people who are very logical, they typically have very logical, predictable life. It's like you just keep on repeating the same thing over and over and over and over based on your past experiences. You can learn, you can grow, but there is a cap, there is a limit. And also, I mean, it's neuroscience has shown us that when we only access our conscious or like our logical mind, we only operate at 5% of our potential. That's not even like anything more about it. 95%, we are driven by our subconscious patterns. We're seeing basically that we've learned, we've stored, we've experienced from a time we're born. Maybe even earlier if you believe in that kind of thing. But everything is being driven automatic. So, and also in our subconscious, we've got a wealth of information. Stuff, you know how sometimes you go, how did I know that? That stuff was already in there. And to tap into that information, we need to really develop our intuition to learn how to trust the impulses. And that's where another powerful aspect of human design, because it shows us again how we are all wired to experience our intuition differently, because it's not always a gut feeling. For me, yes. For you, possibly your sacral manifesting generator also. But for some people, it's different. So when we then combine, I'm not saying logic is irrelevant. Logic is important. It's great if you've got the data and the facts, or you want to make a decision that feels safe and predictable. But when we make decisions about, let's say, life choices, maybe evaluating careers or hiring people or promoting people or doing something or leaving relationships, staying, logic itself is just, it's just not enough.
And it depletes us, doesn't it, to stay in the figuring it out mode. I mean, staying in your higher self, which is some of the human design work I did, which was, first of all, it's great and validating to know that you have a higher self, that you're a wisdom maven or whatever. But also that practice of getting up to floor 10, if I take your analogy. How would you advise leaders to do that? Because we live in a world and cultures that are driven by rational logic, quite binary, and there's a lot of pressure and there's a lot of sort of fatigue. There are also lots of other opportunities. It sounds really like I'm saying it's all bad. It's not all bad. But I think the pressure is there all the time to deliver, particularly cognitively. So how would you advise leaders to step up to the 10th floor and to create that muscle? Because it's like going to the gym, is to create that muscle. It's an emotional muscle, so it's harder to get hold of than our cognitive ones. What would your advice be there, Lena? Because for me, that's what's going to make the difference between stepping out of my nervous system, which is completely deregulated, but it's so familiar I don't realize that, and into something that actually allows me to breathe.
Firstly, I always talk about pause. The power of pause is undeniable, especially when in a high pressure situation. You're about to react, you're about to say something, to do something, to send an email. You pause and you take a breath. And even just that, because especially now when we're using AI, we expect everything instant. We have no patience to wait to do anything. And that's why it's actually overloading us, because we are not designed to operate at such a speed. So even if you just have a pause, especially if you feel like overwhelmed or anxious, We make so much decisions from that reactivity, from being anxious and overwhelmed. I just want to just get it over and done with. Let me just make it something decision better than no decision. But sometimes having no decision is the best space to be. And of course, I realize there are some high pressure situations. And that's why you've got to start practicing when it's not a high pressure. It's like day-to-day moments. Whenever, let's say, somebody triggered you and you want to say something back to them, like you pause. And in that pause, you're like, do I really want to respond that way? And that's when you have a choice. And even if you respond exactly the same, but at least you do it with slightly more awareness, it's like, oh, I overreacted again. You're stuck in traffic, you're running for the meeting, you're feeling this anxiety maybe in your shoulders. Instead of going, oh, bloody traffic, you go, pause. You feel overwhelmed and you can acknowledge what you are feeling. And this is so important, like acknowledging the feeling. I feel overwhelmed. I feel stressed. I feel that it gives you like almost permission that it's okay to feel it. Because whenever you start labeling your emotion, it's like you create a gap between you and the emotion. So you're no longer consumed by that frustration, impatience, anxiety. And in that space, that's where you can start having a little bit of space to make a different choice. So that can be kind of practice. As I said, even in small situations, you're standing in the line waiting for, I don't know, like to pay for your food that you bought at the shop, you're getting impatient. Pause. I feel frustration. I feel impatience. And give yourself permission to feel it. There's nothing wrong. It's human. Even that thing, that's a small thing. It starts more regulating your nervous system and it starts building your capacity to hold more pressure. So when this stressful external event happens, you already have, some foundation within you.
And not reaching for your phone and getting even more frustrated and scrolling while you wait. I'm going to see a lot of that, and clearly I do that as well. But I think to myself, I'm on a good day. Maybe that isn't helping.
That impatience is coming up for a reason. It's coming up for you to be seen, because all emotion is just energy in motion. That's what emotion is. It's moving through your body. And as soon as you feel that impatience or frustration, you want to shove it down through the phone, through distraction, through something. But that suppressed emotion doesn't go anywhere. It sits there and it builds, and eventually it blows out. But if you just acknowledge it, like, oh, I'm standing in a queue and I feel impatience. Okay, I feel it in my chest and I feel so uncomfortable. And I'm just going to allow it to pass through me. Next time it feels a little bit less and a little bit less. And eventually when you're in a boardroom meeting where everybody's like losing their minds, when you can't make a decision, and previously you would have wanted to rip somebody's head off and you feel calm. And that to me is a real freedom, power over your emotions.
And of course, it feels completely unfamiliar, but it's strange. You just sort of realize that you have this distance that you didn't have before, which I think is interesting. But for me, and that's sort of busyness overwhelm. So doing, the cognitive thing. With AI, I'd be really interested in your take on this, Lynn, and your advice to leaders on there is an overwhelm with AI, which is now doing all the cognitive work a lot better than we can, and at a speed that is, a lot faster than we ever could. But leaders' identity, they built their whole identity around that, on being the smartest person in the room, on having the best data, on understanding, seeing the patterns first. So what happens now, and how can we manage that overwhelm, which is a little bit more existential in inverted commas?
Yeah, I mean, AI is a super tool. I use like ChatGPT all the time, but the thing is, I'm not using it, but it's using it with awareness. And also, like what we just spoke about, staying connected to your body. You feel like it's moving fast, it's giving you answers, and then you like passing the answers somewhere else. Maybe you should pause and ask yourself why you're moving in the speed of AI. Is something chasing you? Previously, if you think about it, because I used to be a computer programmer, right? So you write a code and the code crashes, it doesn't work. So you put your breakpoint, you start debugging it, you think about it, the code crashes. So you kind of have those pauses to really manage what's going on. But it's like you pace yourself, eventually you'll come up with a solution, even though it may be like, you may feel frustrated and it's a day later. And not everything is instant. You put it into AI, it gives you output. We get disconnected from ourselves, from what really going on inside of us. It's like this like pressure to do more. And even the time back that you supposedly to get back from AI, we feel like we other crap. So it's just like we have no gaps left for ourselves. And as a result, we disconnect from our true nature, our creative side, our innovative, because you can't be on this autopilot in this kind of a fight and flight mode and still be creative and innovative and intuitive. The two can't coexist. So my advice would be just start observing, like, how are your shoulders? How's your neck? How's your jaw feeling? And then maybe consciously just breathing in the midst of all of that. Just little changes.
Because that's essentially where our human value proposition lies now in an AI world, isn't it? It's in the creativity, intuition, innovation, of course, which comes from a different place in the brain and a different place in the body. How do you think we could integrate that and the idea of human design then into the corporate world? I mean, clearly it's what you're doing, but how could we scale that?
We just need more conscious leaders. What we are trying to do is just isn't working. How much billions are being pumped into solving burnouts and mental crisis, but yet it keeps increasing. Sometimes it's going to reach that peak point until like something just flips and shifts somewhere when people begin to see that the typical solution, the health and wellness apps or go hug the tree, they don't really work anymore. We need to reconnect with ourselves. Start understanding our patterns, our behavior, why we're making certain choices, why we're behaving the way we do. We've got to work on our consciousness. And for me, I believe our only goal in this life is to elevate our consciousness.
That is the most transformative thing we could all do, because we all have personal agency in every system, however big AI is getting, is to elevate our consciousness. What do you think is the most transformative thing we could do with human design in organizations? I mean, you know it a lot more intricately than I do. And I already have lots of ideas of what it could do, but the gap with the existing system is quite big.
I don't think there is like a limit to what it can do, but I think to be speak about it is bringing your best self to work. And what does that even mean? Like, which self are you bringing to work exactly? But so many different selves, and we shapeshift depending on who we're with. Like, you with your boss, you're like one person. You with your colleague, you're another person. Maybe you like, you've got 10 people reporting into you. You're a different person. At home, you're a different person. Keep shape shifting. And that is exhausting, trying to maintain so many different facades. So what human design allows you to do is to be uniquely you, away from all this mask. Who are you really? Having that freedom to express yourself, to know what you want, to know what makes you you, to know what your needs are, and not shrink yourself, not hold yourself back because of what others may think about you, but to really to express yourself honestly and authentically. And I mean, again, I come back to freedom because we think freedom means we can go and vote or we can go buy shoes or we can go on holiday. But that's not freedom if we're living inside of this cage that we built for ourselves. And human design just helps you to open the cage and walk out of it.
I like that idea. It's so interesting, though, isn't it? Because, we can make big changes and still not be free. So, for example, I stepped out of a large organization 7 or 8 years ago and I built myself a different prison, but it was still a prison. Unless we look at our formatting and our patterns, we can find ourselves in that familiar place. And before I let you go, I always like to end my podcast conversations with something really actionable. And if a leader listening is running on empty, doing everything right, in quotes, but still feeling hollow and just unfulfilled, what would your advice be? What would your call to action be for them to act on before the end of this week, for example, in 4 or 5 days' time? Because I think part of it is paralysis by how big it feels. And then we step into this big thing and then build a structure that's a little bit the same.
My advice would be just literally spend 5 minutes. That's all it takes in the morning, instead of reaching for your phone or putting the news on or looking through the emails and already preempting your day, connecting to what would you love your day to be like, right? Because the thing is, our day will unfold, whether consciously or most of the time it's very unconsciously. We just do it on autopilot. But with our energy, we create our reality. That's it. It's like there is no other way. So instead of going on autopilot, you can feel like, what would I love to experience today? How would I want to be? What conversations I want to have? How do I want to treat people? How do I want people to treat me? And you can write it down because for some people it's quite hard to visualize. But just sit, even just for a few minutes a day, to consciously start programming your mind to focus on what you want. Because so often, most of the time, we go, I don't want this. I want to get away from this. This is annoying me. This is not working. But how often do we go, this is working? That's what I would love. This is where I'm going towards. Very, very seldom. Just that little shift, first thing in the morning, already going to start kind of redirecting your brain. And actually, what happens when you start focusing on what you want to experience throughout the day, and it's been proven also backed up by research, when there is a challenge, even if there's like a high pressure moment, you're going to respond very differently. It's not going to take so much energy out of you because you can almost like refocus your mind on a desired outcome rather than on what you don't want. So I would say 5 minutes in the morning without a phone, just do that. And at night, ideally, if you've got a couple of minutes, reflect. Where did I react? Where did I slip back into my old behavior? What can I do differently tomorrow? That's it. It's just like 10 minutes a day, but it can completely change your life.
I'm not going to add anything to that. I'm going to let those two practices land and for our listeners to try them out. Lena, thank you so much. Thank you for coming and sharing your stories and your expertise. Where can people find out more about you and what you do?
LinkedIn. Just simple, one platform, LinkedIn. I'm there.
Okay, super. And I'll put that in the show notes. And thank you so much. My biggest takeaway, I think, is be intentional, because I've been thinking ever since we've been chatting on this podcast throughout the conversation, thinking, oh yeah, it seems so obvious now. I was just building the same structure because, of course, I had the privilege to interview you. So I'm listening intently while you're giving your pearls of wisdom. So I was just thinking, actually, it could be quite simple. Just to come back to what you've just left as an intentional practice. It sounds and it feels so big, but actually there are simple ways of getting there. So thank you very much. Great conversation. Thank you.
Most welcome. Thank you for having me.
What I love about this conversation is that Lena didn't give us a to-do list or any more busyness. She gave us something more dangerous, a new way of looking at ourselves. So the idea that burnout isn't necessarily about what you're doing, but it's about what you're refusing to feel and the energy that you're either not managing or mismanaging. You know, the idea that in a world where AI is eating our cognitive edge for breakfast, let's put it like that, and the ability to be present, to feel, to be consciously in your body, that's not soft skill, that's our competitive advantage. We hope you enjoyed this conversation, and if this conversation stirred something in you, that's data. So don't ignore it, share it, and act on it. And we look forward to seeing you soon for the next episode of Let's Talk Transformation.